quality education must be delivered. With that being said, I am here to guide you in learning. I am Jan Abigail Leary from Santa Ana National High School, your teacher broadcaster for today. For today's lesson, we are going to talk about graphical representations and how to use them. But before we dig into our lesson, let's test your knowledge. Take a look at this graph. We will be using this to answer the following questions. Let's proceed. Question number 1. What activity did I spend on the most other than sleeping? Letter A, eating. Letter B, traveling to school. Letter C, attending school class. Or letter D, reading books and magazines. Did I hear the answer letter C for attending school classes? Well, you got it right. Now, let's move on to question number 2. How many percent of time was spent going to school? Letter A, 2%. Letter B, 6%. Letter C, 10%. You got it right. The correct letter is C, 10%. Now, let's move on to question number 3. How many percent higher is doing the household chores than reading books and magazines? Letter A, 5% higher. Letter B, 6% higher. Letter C, 9% higher. Or letter D, 15% higher. That was great. The correct answer is letter C, 9%. For question number 4, based on the table, what is the difference in hours between traveling to school and reading books and magazines? Letter A, 1 hour. Letter B, 2 hours. Letter C, 3 hours. Or letter D, half an hour. The correct answer is letter A, 1 hour. For our last question, which conclusion is correct about the given graph? A, taking a shower got the least percent of time spent. Letter B, eating 3 meals would need 21% of the time spent. Letter C, 8 hours of sleep in the table is equivalent to 33% in pie graph. Or letter D, higher hours in the table match the lower percent in the pie chart. Excellent! The correct answer is letter C. 8 hours of sleep in the table is equivalent to 33% in pie graph. You are excellent! I believe you got it all correct. But for you to recall more about our topic for today, we will be using another graph. Just like what we did earlier, we will be answering a series of questions using this graph. For question number 1, from the graph, what subject had the highest score? Letter A, English. Letter B, Math. Letter C, Science. Or letter D, Filipino. The correct answer is letter D, Filipino. For question number 2, which subject had the lowest score? Letter A, English. Letter B, Math. Letter C, Science. Or letter D, Filipino. Doing great, students! The correct answer is letter A, English. For the next question, based on the graph, what subjects have more than the passing score of 30? Letter A, all the subjects. Letter B, Science and Filipino. Letter C, English, Math, and Science. Or letter D, Math, Science, and Filipino. Very good! The correct answer is letter B, Science and Filipino. For our question number 4, which sentence best describes the graph? Letter A, the scores are increasing. Letter B, the scores are decreasing. Letter C, English subject is difficult. Or letter D, science subject is not easy. Well done, students! The correct answer is letter A. The scores are increasing. And for the last question, which sentence sentence is true about the score in science? Letter A. Score in science is less than the score in math. Letter B. Score in science is more than the score in English. Letter C. Score in science is 5 points lower than the score in math. Or letter D. Score in science is 5 points higher than the score in Filipino. The correct answer is letter B. Scores in science is more than the score in English. You did excellent in our preliminary activity. Now, let me ask you this question. Do you have to read lengthy material for you to answer the questions we had earlier? With the help of graphic representations, we no longer need to do that. This is what we call maps. Map is an example of graphic representation. There are different types of graphic representations, and the following are the common types of graphs which can be used for easy understanding of facts. Number 1. Bar chart or bar graph. It shows comparisons among the groups or data. The level of each data element is represented by the length of the bar. Bars in the graph can be horizontal or vertical columns. Number 2. Pie chart. It is illustrated in circle and divided into sections, which each section representing a different categories or groups. Each size of the section reflects the percentage of the total area of the pie. Number 3. Line graph. It plots series of related values which show how data values change. There are several simple skills required when using graphical representations, but generally, no matter what they look like, the process or method of understanding them is just the same. I want you to look closely at the given graph. Let's learn how to interpret this graph using the following steps. Step 1. Getting started. Observe the title or headings and legends to determine the context of the data. Example question. What is the topic being examined? The answer is, it is about the age group of indigenous peoples. Step number 2. What do the numbers mean? Understand what all the numbers represent. Look for the largest and smallest values in one or more categories of the data. Example question. What is the percentage of indigenous peoples ages 15 to 64? The answer is, ages 15 to 64 obtained 55.83%. Therefore, indigenous peoples with ages 15 to 64 have the highest percentage or number based on the graph. Step 3. How do they differ? Look at the differences in the values or numbers of the data. Compare the categories such as numbers in ages 15 to 64 and numbers in ages 66. Example question. For how many percent higher is the number of indigenous peoples ages 15 to 64 to the number of ages 0 to 14? The answer is 14.37% higher. Step 4. Where are the differences? Use information from Step 3 to help you make comparisons across 2 or more categories. Example question. Compare the numbers and percentage for ages 15 to 64 and ages 0 to 14. What do you notice? The answer is, the indigenous peoples with ages 15 to 64 have higher percentage or are more in number compared to other ages. And for the last step, Step 5. Why do they change? Why are there differences? Look for reasons for the relationships in the data that you have found. Think about sudden or unexpected changes in the numbers. Example question. Look at the graph where there are more people. What do you think the reason for the difference in number? The answer is Indigenous peoples who are considered young adults and under middle age are dominant in numbers. Now, you have just learned the different types of graphic representations and the steps on how to interpret them. Give yourself a pat on the shoulder because you did a great job. I hope that you have learned something from our lesson. You can go back to our video lesson if you missed anything. For your assessment and activities, please refer to your self-learning modules on page 11 to 20. With that being said, this has been your teacher broadcaster, Jen Abigail Universal, leaving you a quote that says, "A failure is not always a mistake. The real mistake is to stop trying." See you next time, students.